We need to talk about Celine Dion. And no, I don't just mean the voice, the ballads, the global icon status. We all know that part. We've all heard My Heart Will Go On more times than we can count. But what we're going to dive into today is the story behind the voice. This isn't just a tale of a gifted singer who made it big. This is a brutal, gut-wrenching, and ultimately all-inspiring story of survival. It's a story of a woman who built an $800 million empire after starting life sleeping in a piece of furniture, who sang anthems of love while her own heart was shattering into a million pieces, and who is now fighting a battle with her own body that would break most people. This is the story of how the voice of a generation was forged in silence, poverty, and unimaginable loss. Forget the diva on the stage for a minute. You're about to meet the warrior who got her there. And I mean, think about the sheer contrast. On one hand, you have this powerhouse vocalist, someone who doesn't need auto-tune, gimmicks, or flashy production. She can just stand there, open her mouth, and a single note is enough to silence an entire arena. Songs like The Power of Love or Because You Loved Me aren't just songs. They're part of the collective soundtrack of our lives. They're woven into our memories of weddings, proms, heartbreaks, and everything in between. But the spotlight, as bright as it is, casts some seriously dark shadows, and what's been happening in those shadows is the real story here. This is a journey that starts in the most humble way imaginable. We're talking about a woman who came from being the youngest of 14, that's 1-4, siblings in a dirt-poor family. Her first bed wasn't a crib, it was a drawer, a literal drawer padded with blankets. From that drawer, she somehow built a life that put her on the world's biggest stages. But that journey was paved with so much loss, it's hard to comprehend. Losing the one and only love of her life, then losing her brother just 2 days later, saying goodbye to her mother. And then, after all that, her own body starts to betray her with a disease so rare and cruel, it sounds like something out of a medical thriller. This isn't just a rags-to-riches story. This is a modern-day epic about endurance. It's about a woman who kept singing even when her voice was shaking with grief, who stood tall on stage even when her heart was on the floor, and who somehow managed to turn all of her private agony into a source of strength for the entire world. Let's rewind all the way back to the beginning. March 30th, 1968, in a tiny town called Charlemagne, Quebec. This place was the definition of working class. Poor, modest, a world away from the Hollywood glitz that would one day define her life. Celine was the baby of the family, the 14th child. Her arrival basically stretched a home that was already bursting at the seams. Her dad, Adhemar Dion, was a barber who took on carpentry jobs just to keep food on the table. Her mom, Therese, was the rock, the woman who somehow managed to raise this small army of children and hold the home together with love and whatever simple meals she could scrape together. Poverty wasn't just a concept, it was the air they breathed. That story about her sleeping in a drawer? It's 100% true. There just weren't enough beds to go around. But what's incredible is how she talks about it now. She doesn't see it as some sad, pitiful memory. She sees it as the starting line, the humble origin point of this unbelievable journey. She once said, "We had nothing but music and love, but maybe that was enough for me to start dreaming." And man, was that an understatement. Music was everything in that household. It was their treasure. Her dad played the guitar, her mom had a beautiful voice, and the house was always filled with the sound of folk tunes and French songs. The kitchen wasn't just for cooking, it was their stage. The whole family would gather and sing, and it was like a ritual to wash away the exhaustion of another hard day. And in the middle of all this was little Celine, tiny, frail, but discovering that music was her language. She didn't have formal lessons. Her training came from singing along with her family to drown out the sound of their empty stomachs or the unpaid bills. By the time she was 5 years old, she was already a performer. She sang at her brother's wedding, and everyone was expecting a cute little kid performance. What they got instead was a voice so powerful, so full of raw emotion, that it stunned the entire room into silence. People couldn't believe this enormous sound was coming from this tiny little body. This wasn't just a kid playing around. It was a sign, a glimpse of the rare, God-given gift she carried inside her. Her childhood was not like other kids. There were no dolls, no school trips. Her playground was the mirror, where she'd practice the shape of her mouth, control her breathing, and imitate every single note she heard. She spent winter nights, freezing on the cold wooden floors, just listening to her siblings rehearse, singing along softly to herself, as if the music itself was the only thing keeping her warm. For Celine, music was never a hobby. It was a lifeline. It was her ticket out of poverty and her reason for being. This scarcity, this constant struggle, it forged an iron will in her. While other kids were playing, she was meticulously perfecting her French pronunciation. Later, she'd painstakingly mimic English words from tapes, syllable by syllable, without even knowing what they meant. She embraced the grind. Every song was a battle to prove she was worthy. There's this quote from her that just says it all. "I could sleep in a drawer, again, as long as I could still sing." That tells you everything you need to know. It's not about the memory of poverty. It's her entire life's philosophy. Music is breath. Music is everything. Her voice was tempered in that hardship, and it was only a matter of time before it would rise up and take over the world. Her journey into the professional world didn't start in some fancy LA studio. It started with a song written in that tiny house in Charlemagne. In 1980, when she was 12 years old, she and her mom and her brother, Michelle, wrote a song. The demo was recorded in a small local studio. Her voice was still a child's, but the power was already there. It was undeniable. Her brother decided to send that demo tape to René Angelil, a big-shot music manager in Montreal. At the time, René was kind of down on his luck, burned out by the industry and on the verge of quitting altogether. But then he pressed play, and the voice of a 12-year-old Celine Dion filled his office. The story goes that he couldn't stop the tears from rolling down his face. He later said, "I heard a voice from heaven." In that one moment, he found his reason to stay in the game, and what he did next was borderline insane. He mortgaged his own house to fund her first album. Think about that. This wasn't just a business investment, it was an all-in, bet-the-farm gamble on a kid's voice he'd only heard on a tape. From that day forward, their destinies were intertwined. In 1981, her first album came out. It was a smash hit in Quebec. This tiny girl with this colossal voice became an overnight sensation. She was on TV, critics were raving, and she became the new pride of French-speaking Canada. A year later, she goes to the Yamaha World Popular Song Festival in Tokyo. She's 14 years old, standing in front of an international audience of hundreds of millions of people, and she sings with the confidence of a seasoned veteran. She wins. And right then, it was clear. This wasn't just a local star. This was a global talent in the making. Throughout the 80s, she dominated the French-speaking music world, but the real game changer came in 1988. She represented Switzerland, of all places, in the Eurovision Song Contest. She performed with such purity and emotion that she captivated everyone. She won, and that victory officially launched her onto the world stage. For the first time, people outside of Canada and France were discovering this young Canadian singer with a voice that could move an entire continent. But let's be real, this success came at a steep price. She basically sacrificed her entire childhood for it. While other kids were at parties or school dances, she was in a studio, drilling vocal exercises, learning English from cassette tapes. She was constantly on the move, growing up under the glare of spotlights and crushing pressure. She confessed in her memoir, "I never had a real adolescence. I only remember microphones, costumes, and waking up at 5 a.m. for sound checks." The girl who slept in a drawer had made it to the world stage, not just because of her talent, but because of sheer, relentless, back-breaking work. Entering the 1990s, Celine had a new mission: conquer the world in English. This was a huge gamble. Here's this girl from Quebec with a thick French accent who was often made fun of for her pronunciation, but she was relentless. She learned English word by word, vowel by vowel. She was reinventing herself from a Quebec star into a global icon. Her first English album, Unison, was a success, and its single, Where Does My Heart Beat Now, shot into the Billboard Top 5. It proved her powerful adult contemporary style could cross any border. Then came the movies. Her duet with Peabo Bryson for Disney's Beauty and the Beast was a masterstroke. It won an academic award and cemented her as the go-to voice for epic, cinematic love stories. From that point on, the ballad was her kingdom, and the hits just kept humming. The Color of My Love gave us The Power of Love, which launched her into the stratosphere. Falling Into You delivered Because You Loved Me and won a ton of awards, solidifying her title as the queen of the genre. When she sang these songs, you didn't just hear lyrics, you felt your own life story being sung back to you. And then came 1997, the year of Titanic, the year of My Heart Will Go On. That song, it's more than a song. It's a cultural artifact. It was recorded in basically a single take, and it didn't just top the charts, it became a global anthem of love and loss. It swept the Grammys, the Oscars, and turned the album Let's Talk About Love into a worldwide phenomenon. At this point, she wasn't just a singer, she was a force of nature. Even as the decade closed, she didn't slow down. She released one of the most iconic Christmas albums ever, and then took a short break to do something even more important: become a mother. When she returned in 2002 with A New Day Has Come, it was a statement. This was Celine reborn, a mother with a new perspective. But her greatest innovation of this era wasn't an album, it was Las Vegas. In 2003, she started a residency called A New Day at Caesar's Palace. At the time, critics scoffed. Vegas was seen as a career graveyard, the place where old stars went to fade away. Celine didn't just prove them wrong, she completely redefined what a Vegas residency could be. Her shows, directed by the legendary Franco Dragoni, were breathtaking spectacles. She followed it up with another residency, Celine, and between the two, she performed over 1,100 shows, raked in hundreds of millions of dollars, and transformed Vegas into the premier destination for the world's biggest contemporary artists. She paved the way for everyone from Lady Gaga to Adele. She didn't go to Vegas to end her career. She went there to build a new capital of live entertainment.